Catherine of Aragon was a Catholic Spanish princess who was born on December 16, 1485. She was the surviving child of Ferdinand and Isabella, the leaders of Spain. And as is common for the princess of the day, her parents almost immediately began looking for a political match for her. When she was 3 years old, she was betrothed to Arthur, the son of Henry VII. When Catherine was almost 16, she made her journey to England. She safely arrived in England on October 2nd, 1501, and they were married a month later on November 14th, 1501, in Old St. Paul's Cathedral in London. After the wedding and celebration, the couple moved to a castle on the Welsh border. Less than 6 months later, Arthur died, possibly from the sweating sickness. Catherine was now a widow and still young enough to be married. King Henry VII still had a son named Henry VIII, who was 12. She then betrothed him 14 months later after Arthur's death. On June 11th, 1509, Catherine and Henry were married. Shortly after their marriage, Catherine found herself pregnant. Her first 5 pregnancies were unsuccessful, but on February 13th, 1516, she gave birth to a daughter named Mary, and this child lived. Henry was growing frustrated by the lack of a male heir, but he remained a devoted husband. He had 2 mistresses that we know of, and one was named Mary Boleyn, and Henry had fallen in love with her sister Anne Boleyn. It is here that the lives of Henry's first and second wives began to interweave. By the time his interest in Anne became common knowledge, Catherine was 42 years old and no longer able to conceive. Henry's main goal was now to get a male heir, which his wife was not able to provide. Somewhere along the line, Henry began to read the text of Leviticus, which said that if a man takes his brother's wife, they shall be childless. As evidence above, Catherine and Henry were far from childless, and still had one child living. But the child was a girl and didn't count in Henry's mind. The king began to petition the Pope for an annulment. At first, Catherine didn't know about Henry's plans for annulment, and when the news got out, she was very upset. She was also a great disadvantage since the court that would decide her fate was very impartial. Catherine then went directly to the Pope, which she felt would listen to her. This political and legal debate continued for 6 years. Things came to a head in 1533 when Anne Boleyn became pregnant. Henry had to act, and his solution was to reject the power of the Pope of England and have Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, grant the annulment. Catherine was to renounce the title of Queen and would be known as the Prince Dowager of Wales, something she refused to acknowledge through the end of her life. Catherine and her daughter were separated, and she was forced to leave the court. She lived the next 3 years in several unhealthy castles and manors with just a few servants. However, she seldom complained of her treatment and spent a great deal of her time in prayer. On January 7th, 1536, Catherine died at Kimbolton Castle and was buried at Petersburg Abbey.